So this weekend we have a gigantic matchup between the number one Georgia Bulldogs and the number 14 Clemson Tigers at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. I'll let Evan and Jake give their thoughts on this game before I give mine. Evan?
Well, I'm gonna give my thoughts on the specific game in a little bit, just for the seasons of both of these teams. Obviously, Georgia, I think they want to prove something going into this season. Texas and Oklahoma coming in, everyone's like, "Oh, the trendy pick right now is Texas to win the SEC." I think Georgia's gonna win, but a lot of people are picking Texas, and I think they're gonna want to show them who's the dogs of the SEC. So we'll see about that. And then Clemson, this is even more of a pivotal season because as you see sort of the Big Ten adding a bunch of four teams, the SEC adding two teams, sort of a divide with the Big Ten and the SEC sort of branching out from everything. Clemson needs to stay relevant. They were only 9-4 last year. They played some good games, barely lost FSU at home, couldn't string together enough wins. But this was a program that was elite all throughout, or most of the 2010s. Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, but ever since Trevor Lawrence left in 2020, it hasn't been much. So they've got to put it back together. This is a big year. The ACC isn't, again, Florida State we thought was the leader, but after that game against Georgia Tech, we don't know. So the ACC is sort of wide open this year. They need to leave a mark. So in this game, and I usually hate saying this, in this game, I think they just need a good showing. I think Georgia's probably going to win, but it's got to be competitive. They can't like pull an Oregon against Georgia and lose big.
Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I think this will be a competitive game. I think, Clemson will stay in it. Even though, Georgia's that big powerhouse that people, talk about. I think Clemson's got something to prove this season. I think they're gonna be ready for this game. I think they're gonna come out and play with some fire.
All right. With so how Evan mentioned that Georgia is the powerhouse nowadays, 39 consecutive regular season wins. The last time we've seen 40 in a row was the mid 1950s by the Oklahoma Sooners. And also, as Evan mentioned, Clemson, it's been a downhill spiral for them since the mid 2010s after Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, winning those two national titles in 3 years. But as for the game, not many people are giving Clemson a chance because, well, they just look at Georgia and they're like, well, Georgia's just supposed to win by 20 or more, right? The key for me is, can Clemson force the turnovers? You look at Georgia's offense. They don't have Lad McConkey's not there anymore. Brock Bowers is not there anymore. You have to rely on pass catchers that you have not seen much from outside of Dylan Bell.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what I would say is I think Carson Beck is the better quarterback than Cade Klubnik. I think Georgia is
Agree.
more deep than Clemson is. But
Agree.
the only thing, like Clemson has a really good defense. That is what they have going for them. Obviously Georgia does too. But can they? If Clemson can at least compete, this won't be a blowout. If it's in the 40s, Georgia is doing very well. So that'd be something I would look out for. Yeah.
Well,
So
Jordan, you mentioned Lyle McConkey not being there. You mentioned Brock Bowers not being there. Georgia still got two key wide receivers there, Dominic Lovett and Anaya Smith. Um,
they
I
do.
think if they show out and Carson back, can get them the football, Georgia will win this ball game.
You're right. You mentioned Carson Beck. We saw the year he had last year. Can he repeat that? And it's are we talking Heisman in December for Carson Beck,
I know Jake thinks that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are thinking Carson Beck could win the Heisman Trophy.
including
So,
me? I'm thinking it's a really good chance. You
I mean,
know,
I see it as a very wide open year. I mean, in terms of talent, because like again, I a lot of there was a 2024 was a very big draft class with a tons of talent. Jaden Daniel, Caleb Williams going to the NFL. So it's open, and Georgia's going to be a really good team. So as long as he puts up decent passing numbers, he should do well. Which, by the way, Jake, I think Prize Picks had it at over 260 something. Do you like the
at
over for
262 and a
Saturday?
half passing yards for Carson Beck, I think that line is way too low. So if you want to, maybe win some money, you take that line. You can even take his, Demon lying at 299.5. I think that's great value as well.
What about okay, one more line. What about I don't know the exact one. I just heard this from someone else. I think Georgia is a two touchdown favorite, like minus 14. Could Clemson cover? Is it going to be
The
more
line
entertaining than two touchdowns? What do you
the
think,
line
Jake?
has actually moved all the way down to 11.5.
Wow. So people are betting Clemson. I was not going to expect that. Okay, that's a very interesting line. So if Georgia wins by two touchdowns, Clemson doesn't cover. So yeah, that's
I would
Vegas for you.
still, I would still bet Clemson.
I would I would bet. I just think the talent is too overwhelming. But Clemson really, if Clemson loses by four touchdown, that's going to be very bad for them just in public perception. I think.
Yeah, I think Georgia being favored by 11.5. I just think the talent gap is too wide between the Dogs and the Tigers. Give me Georgia to cover. All right, it's
Yeah, I
prediction
mean,
time. All right, it's prediction time, boys. Jake, who wins?
38-35 Georgia. I think Clemson, like I said in the opening, I think Clemson, comes out with fire. I think they play with fire. They keep it close all game, but Georgia pulls ahead.
Evan?
Give me Georgia 42-24, 18-point victory. Clemson gets a late touchdown. I just don't see this one being super close.
Again, I said I like the Dogs to cover. Give me Georgia 35, Clemson 17. A late score from the Tigers makes this game interest or closer than it actually is.